la famille.
Why am I here? Who am I? What are we talking about today? My name's Zach Coelius, and I'm a four-time entrepreneur. I've never had a real job, really, ever, which is awesome. That's my hope, is to maintain that. The last company we started, Triggit, which actually Mike right there started with me back in San Francisco. He lives in Berlin now. He's awesome. We started in 2005, ran it all the way until we sold it in 2015 to LinkedIn and to another buyer. Raised about $25 million, so I know a lot about raising money. We built it up to about, well, Mike did all the hard work, but we built it up to about $30 million in revenue. We had customers like Walmart, Best Buy, Booking.com, Home Depot, TripAdvisor, Vistaprint, like big, huge brands all over the world. And we helped them do Vistaprint. We helped them do retargeting. So you know when you go to a website and you look at a pair of shoes and then those shoes follow you around the internet? That was us. So if you hate us, it's okay, but that was what we did. It works phenomenally well. So now we sold that. I didn't really want to get a real job, and I wasn't really ready to start a new company. And so I've spent the last couple of years investing. Early stage investing, 27 companies now. The most notable would be Cruise Automation, which is a self-driving car company that GM bought for $1 billion. Talk about dumb luck. We invested, and 6 months later, the CEO's over at my house having dinner, and we're just chatting. And I think we're a couple bottles of wine deep, and he's about to leave, and he's like, "Hey, so there's some good stuff coming in the next couple of days. I think you're going to be really happy." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool, great, yeah, bye." The next day I wake up, or maybe 2 days later, I wake up, and there's one of my investors who invests alongside me had emailed me. He's like, "What the fuck's up with Cruise?" And I was like, "Oh shit!" So I go to the internet. I'm like, "Cruise," and then I saw that they had been bought for $1 billion, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." But it's the craziness about Silicon Valley, about the business that we're in, that everybody in this room basically has the potential to start a multi-billion-dollar company, and you don't even know it. Nobody knows it. I think it's the coolest thing ever. I like to think about, like, if you walk down the streets of San Francisco and you look at a car driving down the street, there's a very high probability that car's an Uber. You know, I've spent the last couple months traveling all over the world. I use Uber everywhere I go. And when Travis first started that company, he was a nobody. I mean, literally, Travis was like he was like that one of those entrepreneurs that comes up to you and starts talking to you, and you're kind of like, because he's a little crazy, and you're like, "Travis, I love you, but it's a little hard to deal with you." And now his cars are all over the world. I mean, he's literally, that guy has literally changed the world, and there are dozens and hundreds of other entrepreneurs who've done the same thing. I think that's pretty awesome. I think it's pretty crazy how much value is being created and has the potential to be created. And so that's really what I'm here to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about three things, two big things and one little thing. The little thing is just because it's less important for most people in this room. We're going to talk about raising money for your startup, your baby, what that's about, some lessons that I've learned, some experiences, some history, some good things, some bad things, just sort of like how to do that. And we're going to talk about it in the beginning, the first stage, the early stage. We're going to talk about it in the middle, which is sort of where smart money and traction starts to happen, product market fit, like where it actually is starting to work and what that actually looks like. That's, for a lot of people, I think that demarcation, that separation between those two stages is super important. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is the late stage, briefly. I'll try to keep that relatively short, but we're going to talk about that. I'm also going to try to talk slowly, or as slowly as I can. I usually talk way too fast, and I always forget to do that. So I don't really like decks, because I look at decks professionally all day long. I look at people's decks, and so I get kind of tired of decks. So I just decided instead we're going to look at pictures today because it's much more fun. So let's talk about your baby, the startup. So the most important thing to remember at the beginning of a startup is that it literally is like a baby. And I know that's like a really trite analogy to make, but it's important to remember that like everything you hear about raising money for a startup is at different stages of the startup. So someone tells you, "Oh, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or you need to do this." But that information that they've shared with you, that thing that they've told you to do, only really applies at a very particular stage in life of a company. And so if they tell you, "Hey, you should go talk to a bunch of VCs and have VC meetings," well, that's very different like in the beginning stage when it's like just getting started versus once you have revenue versus once you have customers versus once you're like a giant behemoth. And so the important thing to remember about the earliest stages of the startup, the very beginning of the startup, is that your company literally is like an infant, and almost all of what everyone tells you about raising money does not apply because your company can do nothing. It can't walk, it can't cry, it can poop and sleep and eat, and that's just about it. So literally, the strongest estimation or the strongest recommendation I can give you about raising money at the beginning of any company is just like, don't raise any money. Focus on your baby and don't do anything else. Literally the most important thing to do for the first couple years of that baby's life is just kind of help it grow. The first most important thing to do at the beginning of your startup's life is help it grow. Focus on your traction. Focus on your idea. Focus on getting people excited about it. Focus on validation. I'm going to talk about all these things in a second. But focus on the things that help your startup grow. Don't spend any time worrying about raising money in the very beginning of a startup because it's almost impossible. And this is I'll leave you a bunch of lessons here, and I'll try to come back to them at the end. But this is the first lesson that I think is one of the most important lessons in raising money, which is that raising money is very binary. And so what I mean by that is that it's either very, very, very easy. So when you first started Facebook and then everybody starts using Facebook and everybody in every college wants to use Facebook and everybody's on Facebook, all the investors basically are begging to give you money. Or it's impossible. And the truth is that for almost every stage in your startup's life, you're going to find that like raising money is either the most impossible thing you've ever done or it's really easy. The trick is that when it's very, very hard, just focus on growing your baby. Don't worry about raising money until you get to the place where it's very, very easy. Then just go grab a bunch of money and move on to the next stage. And so in my experience, my recommendation is always, in almost every startup I talk to, is that if you can't raise money easily, if it's going to be difficult to raise money, you need to do something different. And that different thing is to focus on your startup and not spend your time focusing on raising money. So that's the first lesson of raising money. So let's talk about the three things that are important, the things that actually get you to raise money. One, oh shit, doesn't look very good. It looks so much better on this. Look, it's so pretty. That's terrible. Okay, well anyway. The first thing about raising money, and this is the secret for any startup, this is about team. So if you're this guy, or in the real world, of internet world, if you're Jeff Bezos, anyone would give you money in any situation. If you're a superstar, if you've started a company for $1 billion or you've been very successful in the past, it's very easy to raise money. It's something that that every investor invests in. So you think about it, like Jeff Bezos, if he came to me and he's like, hey, I'm starting a startup, I'm not going to tell you what it is, and I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do with it, and by the way, it's a $1.5 billion valuation, I would be like, here's my money. Please, it's Jeff Bezos. And what happens for any startup is it's the same thing, is that we all are on this curve of those of us who are not like Jeff Bezos, way down here, and Jeff Bezos, who can raise at any valuation in any way, shape, or form. We're all on that curve. And the reality is that for anyone who's in this room, most likely we're more like this. We are all basically working on raising money because we're just getting started in the startup game. We're learning about this because we're just getting started in the startup game. And no one's going to basically just hand you money at a $1 billion valuation because you're like Jeff Bezos. But at the end of the day, the first and most important thing to think about is it's about the team and who you are and how good your team is. So if you can find great people to work with you who are very experienced, and so you can make it so that they're a little more grown up and a little more capable, I highly recommend it. But that first variable in any conversation with a startup investor is who is the team and who's involved in this process. The second part of raising money is traction. So I'm going to get into sort of a lot about traction in a secondary part of this conversation. But the thing to think about with traction, and like what I was talking about earlier when I was talking about getting your baby to grow, is traction is everything. And so if you're an investor in a startup, what you're really looking for is you're looking for that startup to de-risk as much as possible the investment. So what you're looking for is a company that has customers, a company that has people who are interested in their product, a company who has users, a company who has made progress. whenever you can get, and we'll get into sort of what this all means in a second, but whenever you can get to that point of progress, you're way ahead in the game. So highly recommend that you have, that you think about traction in the process. And the third example, the third thing that people invest in is technology. So if you bring me the next newest awesome cellular phone communication technology, you can demonstrate it. It's already a built technology. Great. Like, we can sit down and have a conversation. Most of the time when you're in an early stage, you don't have technology yet. You're raising money to build technology. But at the end of the day, when you go back to it at the highest level, the three things that people invest in, they invest in people, they invest in traction, and they invest in technology. That's kind of where we're at. But, so you're just getting your company started. You have no product, you have no users, you have no technology, but you need money, because usually people do need money. You need something to get going. And so what I always say is the only place to go is friends and family. And it's the worst place to go because almost assuredly you're going to lose all their money. So just tell them that. Make sure you tell them that. But that's the deal, which is that basically your friends and family are the only people who know you. They're the only people who trust you, and they're the only people who are likely to write a check based on that trust and that love, that belief that you're going to succeed. And if you can't raise money from your friends and family, you might as well just quit. So the first place to go in any fundraise process, the very beginning of the life of your company, is you go to friends and family. You don't go to professional angel investors. You don't go to VCs. You go to friends and family. If you come to me looking to raise money and I'm sort of unsure about you, I'll always ask, I'll be like, so how much money have you raised from your friends and your family? Because at the end of the day, if you're actually very good, if you're someone who is likely to be very successful, your friends and your family are going to ask to invest in you because they're going to believe in you. They know you. They trust you. They're going to want to invest in you because they have that belief in you. If you come to me looking to raise money and your friends and family aren't asking to invest in you, I don't know. Why aren't your friends and your family asking to invest? So at the end of the day, okay, that's true. But that doesn't mean that it matters. Like if your friends basically offer you $1,000, $500, your family offers you a little bit of money, it's an indication that it's meaningful. So yes, like the check size doesn't actually matter. It's the fact that they are interested in investing. And so it's a very important beginning part of the process. The thing to remember though is, one, you're likely to lose their money. 80-90% chance that money is going to go into the toilet. So make sure that you tell them that up front so that there's no hard feelings at the end. If you go to your friends and family and promise them that you're going to make them rich and then you fail, that's going to destroy your relationship, and it's going to be much worse than having basically not done it at all. I highly recommend that you tell them. Two, it's very important to be very fair. So the valuations that you set when you talk to friends and family, really, 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 really important to keep it fair and to be very open with them about that valuation. It's an incredibly important part of the process. And three, when you're dealing with friends and family, it's super important to just keep them informed about the risks of the startup process. So for everyone who's been through a startup, and those of you who haven't, I like to say that being in a startup is sort of like being in a dark alley with Mike Tyson, and in his left hand he has an ice cream cone, and in his right hand he has a fist, and you never know which one's going to hit you in the mouth in any given moment. So every day in a startup, you wake up in the morning and there's a call from a new customer and they're super excited. They're like, woohoo, I love your product. And you feel so happy. And Mike Tyson's giving you ice cream cone. And you're like, oh, thank you, Mike Tyson. And it's like startups feel great when that happens. It's like, I have success and my customers love me and I'm going to succeed and we're all going to get rich. And then 2 hours later, that customer emails you back. He's like, oh, actually, I sent that to the wrong person. I think your product sucks. It was that other guy's product that I liked. I'm sorry. And Mike Tyson punches you, and you're like, oh, man. And you feel the pain of being in a startup. And every day in the beginning of the startup life cycle is like that. And it's hard as hell. It's the hardest fucking job in the world. I don't think there's any harder job. I've never actually had a job, but I know a lot of people who have. And the more I talk to them, the more I come to believe that it is officially the hardest job in the world. But when you're talking to your friends and your family about your startup, especially when they've invested, you need to remember that you need to share with them the hard parts, and you need to share with them the good parts, and you need to just constantly tell them that this is a process and it's a long road, and nobody's going to get rich here fast. And remember, you're likely to lose money. We're all likely to do that because that relationship is way more important than anything else. Okay. So let's talk about the important stuff. let's talk about the smart money. So this is what most of the people in the room are thinking about when they're thinking about raising money. They're thinking about professional angels. They're thinking about venture capitalists. They're thinking about the people that basically are out there who give money away for a living. They're thinking about guys like me who write checks to startups. The important thing to think about with smart money is that it's all about proof. It's about de-risking as much as possible so that investors can look at your company and feel very, very comfortable that some element of what you're doing has been de-risked in a way that they can basically get their head around writing a check. On the other side, and this is also important to remember, is the nature of this business is where one investment can make you 1,000 times your money or 10,000 times your money. And so you kind of end up spreading your checks around relatively broadly and try to invest in a lot of companies, because if you find the one that makes you 1,000x or 10,000x, well, you could have missed on the previous 900 and you're still way ahead of the game. So it's this very weird phenomenon when you talk to investors where on one hand, basically they literally are like playing a slot machine and they just walk down and they're just like quarter, 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 and they just wait for the one that's going to make them 10,000 times their money. On the other hand, it is about de-risking. It's about basically when I'm looking at your company, and I'll talk about in a second the questions that I ask. Like, these are important questions, and it's a thing that I'm trying to figure out. And it is about trying to figure out, like, is there risk in this? Have they removed this risk? Where are we at? So first, idea. Let's talk about the idea. So everyone says ideas are shit. I think ideas are shit. Like if you come to me with your idea, it's functionally shit. Like, it doesn't mean anything. Like, having an idea, everyone has an idea. Like, my Uber driver has an idea. Everybody has an idea. Like, it doesn't matter. Your idea does not matter. But what does matter, what is incredibly important, what is the most important thing I think in a startup after team, is the validation of an idea. And what do I mean by a validation of an idea? The validation of an idea means that you have found an idea that is interesting, and you have gone out and you have started to prove it. You're able to show me that your idea is actually a good idea. So for example, you build an MVP of your product, and you start giving it to users. And users love it. They're like, this is great stuff. Like, I need to use this product. And they start emailing you every day asking you for more features. And they start recommending that their friends use it. Like, maybe you only have a few hundred people who are on that MVP, but those people are validating that the idea is a good idea. Another validation. Let's say you're building a product for businesses. Maybe it's for their customer service. And you go to their customer service team and you're like, hey, I've got this idea. I'm working on this product. Well, if they actually have a problem that they want you to solve, they should be willing to write you a letter that says, I love this idea. This is the best idea ever. I would love to buy this idea once it's actually built. Please give this guy money. Because if that's actually a problem that they want solved, if your idea is actually a good idea, then they should be willing to do as little as write you a letter. Those levels of validation that you can get in the market can come in a myriad of different ways. It's not just about users using your product. It's not just about letters from customers. But wherever you can get that validation really, really proves that idea out. And like when I'm investing, when I'm looking at startups, I'm looking for those points of validation. And it comes in a very broad continuum. You know, you can have it in many different ways and shapes and forms and in different levels. But like that validation is really what I'm looking for. Because as soon as we have that validation on an idea, we get to the second step in an idea, which is that we get to drill down. So a lot of entrepreneurs will come to me and they'll have an idea. It'll be broad. We're going to create the AI to solve this very big problem. And here's the 10,000 features that we're going to have. We're going to have this cool ability that you can ask it any question, and it will be able to answer any question. And wherever you go, it will tell you something interesting. And by the way, it will also tell you when it's about to rain, 3 days before it's about to rain. And it will have a robot bring you an elevator from a drone. An elevator, what do you call this thing? An umbrella from a drone that will fall into your hand whenever you need it. I mean, like the dreams of entrepreneurs, myself included, I've felt those dreams. The dreams they're wonderful. It's the best thing about being an entrepreneur. You're lying there in bed and you're like, oh, it'd be so awesome if I can do X, Y, and Z, and you just dream and you dream. But the trick is to go from a dream to the specifics. And those specifics are about finding that validation and then drilling down to the one product, the one set of customers, the one thing that needs to be built that's very discrete, and where we can have a conversation that's not about all the things you are going to do, but the one thing you are going to do. one customer you're going to serve, one problem that you're going to solve, and making it very, very, very concrete, very specific. No uncertainties, no questions. It's like we are now getting very narrow, very tight, very fast. So Uber, we're going to change the world with cars, and everyone's going to have cars, and you're going to push buttons, and it's going to be super awesome. And then all of a sudden, we're going to have these 6 black cars, these town cars in San Francisco, and you can push a button on your phone. We built this little tiny app, and people will call one of these 6 cars, and they'll show up and pick them up, and then they're going to drive them to wherever they're going to go, and they're going to pay their credit card. Great. We've got validation, and we've got a very specific product in a very specific market for a very specific set of customers, and now we're going to see what happens. So the trick is that process of that validation, and because it enables us to get to this point of being very specific about the process. The second part of this is when we're talking about smart money knows your market really well. If it doesn't, it's dumb money. But usually, if they're talking to you, they know your market really well. You have to know your market better than any investor you talk to. So if I'm going to sit down and talk with you about a market that we're going to invest in, so in my case, Mike and I know a lot about retargeting because we spent a long time getting our ass kicked in retargeting. If we're going to talk about retargeting, you better know a lot about retargeting because I know a lot about retargeting and I have friends who know a lot about retargeting. But in any case, when you're talking to an investor, you need to make sure that you know your market really, 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 really well because otherwise you're going to get in trouble. So if you go back to the beginning, when we're talking about that baby, when you're just starting with your business, that's one of the most important things you can do is just constantly be learning about your market, establishing that dominance, that ability to know more about your market than anybody else. Because if I know more about your market, you're never going to get a check from me or any other investor. It's a super important part of the process. So let's talk about traction. Because everybody talks about traction. Traction's the hot word. Everybody loves traction. At the end of the day, traction is everything. If you have traction, your market is validated. Your idea is validated. Your team is validated. Everything you do is validated to the extent that you have traction. And so when I think about startups, when I think about those babies, when you're first getting them going, the trick is to take your big idea and bring it down to as small of an idea as possible that you can demonstrate that you can actually get traction against that. Whatever it is, just narrow it down, focus it down, make it as small and as specific and as tractable as possible. And suddenly we can start to have a conversation about hey, look, I said I was going to do this, and then I went and did that. And look, I have customers who are happy with what I'm doing, or users who are happy with what I'm doing, and we're demonstrating that we are basically at the point that we can make some progress because these users are like this. So, whenever you're in that state of oh, I don't know if I can go raise money or not. I talk to investors, and investors don't want to invest in it. It's really hard to raise money in Berlin. Investors are idiots. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. This is blah blah. Forget all that. Go figure out how to get traction. Take some part of your problem, some part of the thing that you're working on, and figure out how to get to a point where we can look and see, I did X and Y happened, and I can repeat it. It's everything. Now, the best traction is obviously revenue. The second best traction is obviously customers and users. But really, any sort of traction is better than nothing because at the end of the day, in the way I think about a startup journey, is it's literally imagine that you're standing at the bottom of Mount Everest. You're up in the Khumbu in Nepal, and the air is very thin, and you look up and you're like, holy shit, that's a big mountain. And it's not about just basically saying, I have this dream of flying to the top of that mountain, because that's not what a startup is. It's literally a process of walking from here to the top. First you go through the ice field that falls on your head and almost kills you, and then you sleep, and then you almost die because there's no air up there, and then you climb up to the next one. And it's all about that process of one step at a time, one day after another, of slowly walking up the hill as Mike Tyson is trying to punch you in the head, and trying to figure out how you're going to get to the top of that mountain. And so whenever you can find traction in your business, that first step, I highly recommend it. But traction, really at the end of the day, comes down to what I think is probably even more important, which is finding your product market fit. And so one of my good friends who runs Y Combinator is a guy named Michael Seibel, and he has the best analogy I've ever heard for product market fit. And for every company I talk to, I swear I use this every single time. So imagine your customer, you go to your customer, and his hair is literally on fire. I mean, his hair is burning, like fire coming off of his hair, like true flames, which is a crazy thing to see. But imagine your customer's hair is literally on fire, and you reach into your pile of bricks and you hand him a brick, and he grabs the brick from you and he puts out the fire, and he thanks you profusely. He's like, "Oh my God, you're like the best person ever. Like my hair was on fire and you helped me put it out." Like that is what your product is at the beginning, and that's what your customer is at the beginning. That is product market fit. And that moment is the most magical moment you've ever experienced in your life. Because what happens is like you have a customer who has true pain. He's truly in pain. And you said, here's the shittiest piece of shit ever that is not designed to solve your problem, but it's better than what you have. Here's the shit. And the customer is banging his head with the brick, which can't feel good, but he puts the fire out and he thanks you because you gave him the shittiest product ever, but it literally was what he needed to solve his problem. In your startup, it's the same thing. So when we were doing Triggit, at the early days of Triggit, I would call up customers and I'd be like, "Hey, we have this awesome piece of technology you should buy from us. It's super cool. It's the best thing ever." And we talked for like an hour and they would be like, "Okay, yeah, maybe. Can you call me in 6 months? That would be awesome." It was just over and over. No one wanted to work with us. It was brutal. It was it literally was the most painful thing in my life. It sucked. Years and years of that. Really bad, really painful. Like Mike Tyson just punching me in the face over and over every day. And then every now and then someone would say yes and be like, "Woohoo!" And then it was back to that. And then we partnered with Facebook, which has its own upsides and downsides. But we partnered with Facebook, and Facebook enabled us to do retargeting on Facebook. So we got to follow you around Facebook with those shoes all across Facebook. So before we had to follow you around the rest of the internet, now we got to follow you around Facebook. You fucking can't get away from those shoes. They're going to follow you everywhere. So we'd call up a customer and we'd be like, "Hey, we can do retargeting on Facebook." And they'd be like, "Okay, great, sign me up. I'm done." We'd be like, "Hold on, what do you mean?" They're like, "We're good. Send me the contract. We're going to start immediately." I'm like, "Don't I have to talk to you about how awesome we are?" Like, no. Can I spend $1 million with you tomorrow? I'm like, "Yeah, I hope so." "Mike, can we spend $1 million?" It was amazing. We literally went from basically pulling teeth, and it was the hardest thing you've ever done to sell, to suddenly every customer in the world was calling us up saying, "Hey, this is Walmart. We really want to do that retargeting on Facebook thing. Can we work with you?" We're like, "Yeah, I guess." "Mike, can we work with Walmart? They're really big." Sorry, Mike. I got to take advantage of this. It's we rode down this crazy ride. But that's for your startup. It's the same thing. It's that product market fit. That moment when it works, that's what happens. Is literally you write an email to somebody and you're like, "Hey, you should use my product," and they're like, they email you back and they're like, "Oh, thank you for emailing me. I definitely want to talk to you." You call somebody up, you cold call them, and they're literally putting their kid to bed, and they're like, "Hey, shut up," and they start talking to you. That moment of when your customer has true pain, your product actually solves their pain in some way, shape, or form, even though it's a total piece of shit in the beginning, because all products are total pieces of shit in the beginning. That's product market fit. The search for that is the most important thing you can do in the startup. So if we go back to the baby in the beginning, it's just focus on finding that one place where you have product market fit in any way, shape, or form, and everything else becomes a lot easier. It's the nature of this business, the secret of this business. So one other thing, I know you guys will hear about this a lot. I don't know if anyone knows who this is, but this is Reid Hoffman. So Reid's the smartest guy in Silicon Valley. He was an investor in Triggit, and I would go and I would get on my knees and be like, "Please tell me more." It's just brilliant. But social proof, a lot of people talk about social proof and how important it is. And I highly recommend get it wherever you can in any way you can and beg, borrow, and steal it. But the great thing about this community, the great thing about this business that we're in, is that anyone in this room could be a billionaire. I mean, literally, I have dozens of people who I know who are now billionaires. It's just fucking crazy. And because of that, nobody knows who in this room could be a billionaire. And so generally what happens in tech communities is everybody's nice to everybody else because they don't want to be an asshole just in case they piss off the future billionaire. Because when a guy's got $1 billion, he could do a lot of damage. Like if they don't like you and he's got $1 billion, So everyone's generally pretty nice and pretty giving and pretty open because you never know who's going to be the next Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, or take your pick. And so the great thing is that this community is generally very giving. People are very helpful because not because they're nice, but because they're greedy. They want to be helpful because they think it's good for them. Some of them are nice, some are assholes, but generally people are helpful. And so I highly recommend that in this process, constantly be reaching out, asking for help. You might not always get it, but ask for it. You never know who's going to give it to you. I can tell you that it was very helpful in our years whenever we could get help. So I have to look at my notes. The last thing I'll say before I move to the third short section, and then we can open it up to questions, is talking about relationships. So the secret to raising money, almost always, is if the person who's investing in you knows you, it's a lot easier because they've de-risked substantially. Because when somebody comes up to me who I don't know, I'm like, I don't know you. Are you smart? Are you dumb? I can't really learn that quickly. Are you trustworthy? Are you untrustworthy? Are you diligent? Do you work hard? Are you profligate with your money? Are you lazy? I don't know. And so for you as a startup founder, it's a terrible thing to say, but it's actually true. Trying to build relationships with investors takes a long time, but it will make your life a lot easier when you do want to raise money. So if it's really hard to raise money right now, my recommendation to everyone in this room is find and meet investors, get to know them, and build that relationship over time. And so when you actually do get product market fit, when you hand the brick to your customer and the customer puts out his hair on fire and he thanks you, you can call me up, please call me up, and be like, hey, Zach, it worked. And I'll be like, sweet, I'll send you a check. And because I know you already, I trust you, I've gotten to know you, and you have product market fit, it makes it a lot easier to do that. And so building, and I think a lot of people recommend that. They're like, hey, build relationships with investors. But here's what I would tell you about how to do that. Generally, the most important thing to remember is that when you give out free money, everybody wants to be your friend. It makes sense, right? When you write checks, everybody wants to be your buddy. So I get a lot of emails from people every day, from people like, hey, give me free money. And my favorite is people will email me over LinkedIn. They'll be like, hey, I've got this startup, and can you write a check and send it to this address? It's awesome, right? I'm like, that's super cool. I wish I could get people to do that to me. But on the other hand, my job as a professional investor is to learn and to know about more markets, to learn and know about more products. And so what I love is that when startups who I've gotten to know, who I've met, people who I've starting to build a relationship, when they send me emails, that they teach me things. So they send me an email, they're like, here's how my startup is doing, and here's what here's our traction, here's our new employees, here's our new customers, here's an update. Send it once a month, send it every few weeks. I don't care. It's an email. I'll read it if I want to. I usually do. I read almost all of them. And also, include important information about your market, about things you're learning, things that are interesting that I don't know about. Be like, hey, here's what we're seeing in the Berlin startup scene, or here's what we're seeing in our space, or here's what we're seeing talking to our customers. Here's what's working and not working. Providing value is useful, and it actually demonstrates that you're smart and you're capable, and that I would actually be interested in investing in you. So that would be my hint for when you're dealing with investors and you're trying to build those relationships. If you add value to the investor, that will help a lot in that process. It'll go a long way. So the last one we're going to talk about briefly, just because I figure we should talk about it, is the third stage of startup investing, which is smart money. So what that means is now you have $50 million in revenue or $20 million in revenue or a whole bunch of revenue. You got a product, you got 100 employees, and you're building a real business. At the end of the day, basically, that money can come from a lot of different places. So the easiest one is venture capitalists. Most of them are relatively smart. Some of them are not. Dumb money. There's a ton of dumb money sloshing around, which is just basically people who are desperate to invest in any startup they can possibly get into. In my experience, dumb money sucks, so I highly recommend you don't take it. But money's money, so if you need money, it's better than nothing. But it does have its nasty ramifications. Debt. You can always raise debt. In my experience, debt can be awesome and it can be the worst thing ever. So be very, very careful when you raise debt. And then banks, which is most startups don't raise from banks, but it can happen. The most important thing to remember about all this stuff is that basically you need to think really, really hard about the capital you raise once you get to the later stages, because that capital directly impacts the future of your company in ways you don't always anticipate. Because the type of money you raise and the type of outcomes that the investors that are investing in your company are looking for will impact your exits, will impact if you're going to even have a job in the next 3 or 4 years. It will impact the way you grow. It will impact who you hire. Everything you do about your company will be impacted by that money. Whereas the early money just wants to see you get traction and see you succeed. The late money basically has an idea for where it wants you to go. And if you don't get there, like, you're going to be in big trouble. So I highly recommend you think hard about where you want to go when you do that. Two, it's all about the numbers. Obviously, it's about revenues, and you can if you can't put it on a spreadsheet, it's not really gonna work very much for that late stage money. But always remember that, like, it's still your company. You started it, you got it all that way, and just remember that it's your company, and it's not all about the numbers. Like the day I sold my company, it was like the weirdest day of my life. I mean, literally, like, I went from 10 years of just like thinking about one thing to suddenly just like that thing was gone, and it was like a part of my soul just fell off. Like, literally, it just like fell into the ground. I was like, hey, what are you doing down there? Like, weirdest fucking thing. And like, so the it feels like it's a business and a spreadsheet and a revenues and a customers, but at the end of the day, it also becomes part of your soul in a way that it's hard to anticipate until it suddenly falls onto the ground. You're like, oh, wow, look at that. That's certainly a thing to think about. I could obviously blather about this for a long time, but I think the most important thing is to jump into questions. I love questions. I specifically love questions that like no other VC would ever answer. So if you have questions that you don't think I want to answer, please ask them. I love to answer questions that are weird and uncomfortable, and I look forward to getting to know the rest of you afterwards. So thank you for all for coming.
My question is how to get money and remain independent, because this is so usually if someone gives money, he wants to have some, behavior.
Yeah, yeah. The secret to that is very easy. The more you grow your baby, the more the company grows, the less you have to sell to basically to get the capital that you get. So, if you try to raise money in the beginning, you'll have a very low valuation, and you'll end up with a small check to buy a relatively large amount of your company. But if you're able to get that traction, if you're able to find that place where you're able to move the business along without raising capital through bootstrapping, you end up basically much further along in that process. You end up giving a lot less control. You end up raising. That's the easy answer. That's what everybody says. We all know that answer. That's an obvious answer, right? The hard answer is that, like, there's no easy answer. Like, it's the nature of this business is that if you need the capital, you're going to sell and you're going to lose control. And so the most important thing to do is to remember that the person you're giving control over to, that person who's becoming your partner, just if you have the ability, find somebody that you trust to be in that position. Somebody that even if they are in control, you think they will do what's right for you and your company. Because at the end of the day, like, when you sell part of your soul, they now own that. And they're going to do what they want with that. And you better hope that they're good people and that they're aligned with you. Otherwise, you don't sell and stay small and bootstrap as long as possible. But yeah, there's no way in this business to get a bunch of money and then not give up some control in some way, shape, or form.
And if you say, I hope they are good people, are there good people?
Yeah.
Or money is dictating everything?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example with Reed. I think this is a great. So in Triggit, when we were, I think we were probably like 3 or 4 years in, we found this thing called real-time bidding, which is the sort of underlying technology behind some of the biggest advertising technology. And we found it really early, like we were first. And we got on it when it was 20 million ad impressions a day was transacted via real-time bidding. It's now like 200 billion a day. So imagine the growth curve. Like we started when it was 20 million and it's now 200 billion. So like, and we were riding that curve in the beginning and it was taking off. Like it was going to the moon. And we were like, this is awesome. Like we're geniuses. We figured this shit out. Like, woohoo! This VC firm, our note was coming due with this VC firm. So we owed them $1 million on the note. And the VC firm was like, ooh, guess what? You owe us $1 million. And we're now going to own more of your company because of the nature of the note, they were in a position to screw us, and they were going to screw us. They were screwing us. And so Reed and I had lunch, and I said to Reed, I was like, what should I do? Like, they're going to screw us, and I don't have the money to pay them off, and I can't raise money fast enough. Like, I'm kind of fucked. And Reed said, he said two things. He said, first of all, the reason why I'm going to tell you to do what I'm about to tell you to do is because the secret to my job as a professional investor is to find that one company that's going to be worth 10,000x and invest in that one company. Because if I invest in one company that's worth 10,000x, I can lose a lot of other bets. And like that's so my business as a professional investor, and my business too, but what he was saying is to be in every great deal. And the thing that works for being in every great deal is that you're always entrepreneur friendly. So if I always do what's best for the entrepreneur, this is Reed talking, then all the other entrepreneurs will know that I'm like the best investor ever to have on their cap table, and they'll all call me, and maybe I'll be lucky enough to find the next Facebook, the next LinkedIn, the next stuff he's invested in because he's brilliant, right? So that's what he does. So what he told me is he's like, okay, great. Here's what you do. You go to the VC and you say, fuck you. We're shutting it down. We're going to wipe out the entire cap table. So Reed had maybe like $500,000 invested in the company via him and his partners. Wipe out Reed, wipe out the VC, wipe out everybody, wipe out the whole thing. Just like, it's all done, here's the keys, have fun. And he's like, then just wipe everybody out. Then you can go restart the company, go rewrite the code, go back to work, and I'll invest in you again. And I was like, so you lose $500,000 in that scenario? And he was like, yeah, but that's the right thing to do for you. And so like, yeah, there are good people out there. They do exist. Reed's one of them. There are others that are good like that. I aspire to be, one fraction of his 1,000th of bit as cool as he is. But yeah, they do exist. So, they're there. So.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your role as a VC after you write the check and how your style might differ from other VCs.
So there's two parts. Well, there's a lot of parts to answering this question, but there's two parts I'll talk about. One is that I like to refer to myself as a degenerate but washed up entrepreneur. So basically, I love being an entrepreneur. Like, it's the funnest job ever, but I've spent a long time doing it, and I'm a little weary. So the cool thing that I get to do with the companies I work with is I get to play pretend entrepreneur. So like they come to me with their hard problems, and I'm like, oh, here's what you should do, and like we can talk about all these great ideas, and then I'm like, okay, you go do the work now. So like they go do all the hard work, and then I just get to have the fun part, which is the ideas. So I love doing that. I love being part of that part of the process with the companies I work with. I get a lot of joy out of that. The other thing is that I've always been sort of degenerate about enjoying raising money and the process about thinking about raising money and thinking about how to position a company and when's a good time to raise money and how to raise money. So I spend a lot of time working with my startups about raising money. But yeah, generally what I try to do is I try to be as involved as I possibly can, because the thing is, if I'm helpful for my companies, then hopefully they'll recommend me to their friends, and I'll get to see more cool companies, and I'll get to invest in, the next big thing. That's what I try to do. I think that's what every VC tries to do. The problem is that the nature of this job is that there's a lot of other things that basically, push for your involvement, push for your time. I don't sit in any boards because I think boards generally are a big waste of time. But if a lot of VCs have to sit on boards because of the way their firms are structured. But yeah, no, just try to be as helpful as possible and try to suck a little less every day is my motto. Set a bar and just try to get over it.
So I've started one venture-backed company before, and one of the really key things that was really important for us early on is that we had a lot of connections to angels through my co-founder's older brother. I don't even know if we would have been able to make it at all without that. And so I wonder what advice you have for people who don't have those connections or haven't been in a senior position in a company that let them get connections to angels themselves.
Yeah, so I think if you go back to like what I said about building relationships with investors, I think that strategy also works. So like, you can go network and you meet somebody and you build a relationship, or you can just cold email them. You can be like, hey, investor, check out this cool thing that I'm teaching you about the Berlin software market and the particular place that I sit in. And here's a write-up that is actually useful. Ways that you can add value in that ecosystem is always like a good idea. Yeah, go follow it up.
Sorry, I don't think I explained that well. I meant in terms of actually finding out who good angels to get in touch with are. How do you know which people that you actually want to have involved? There's just so much uncertainty at that point if you don't have the knowledge of the people.
Oh, you mean, okay, so how do you determine who's good and who's not good? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. That's a good question. It's really about basically talking to people who've worked with them in the past, doing reference checks, But yeah, we had this one guy. I will not name him, but I want to because he's a fucking idiot. So this guy, we'll call him Mike. His name was not Mike. No, not Mike. That's bad. Mike's a good name. We'll call him Bob. So Bob, he finds us in the early days of Triggit, and we give this presentation. He comes up, and we had just raised like $1 million from guys like Reed, and so it's like huge social proof. And Bob's like, "Oh, I want to invest," and I'm like, "Oh, round's full, can't invest." And he's like, No, I desperately want to invest. I'll help you so much. I promise I'll be the most useful investor ever. I'm like, he doesn't even know me, and I'm like, you're just investing because Reed invested, but whatever. We let Bob invest. He put in $25,000. In $1 million round, and at that point we had like $2 million of total invested capital. So then we get through this crazy period where the VC firm tries to fuck us, and Reed tells me to go tell him to fuck off, and that works, and they back off. And then we're like, I go and I end up pitching literally 100 VCs, and it was in the middle of the 2009 or 10. I'm trying to remember. So 100 VCs I've gone and pitched, and no one says yes, and we're dead in the water. And so somehow we get Spark Capital agrees to basically give us a term sheet, and it's like this huge shitty term sheet. They were going to give us $4 million on a $4 million valuation, plus we had $2 million of notes that were converting. So 70% of the company would have belonged to the investors. It was like this terrible situation. And so I convinced them to give us a loan. Oh, by the way, so this was on April 1st. We owed Google I think we owed them $300,000, $250,000, and 3 days before that, we were down to $5,000 in the bank, and that's when Spark gives that term sheet. So we're totally effed, right? So Spark gives us a term sheet, and we're like, okay, and then we're like, we can't take that term sheet, but I convinced them to give us a loan to stay alive so that we can negotiate the term sheet correctly, and they do it. I don't know why they did it, because they gave us some leverage, but they were cool. They were good guys. They were actually good guys. So this guy, Bob, he finds out we're dead, right? We're dead in the water. And then he finds out that we have $250,000 in the bank because Spark gave us a loan, and we're not quite dead yet because they gave us $500,000, but we gave $250 of it to Google because they would have shut us off, and we had $250 in the bank to stay alive for the next month while we negotiated the term sheet. So Bob finds out, and he has this $25,000 note, and so all the notes have come due. They'd all come due, and we told all the investors what was going on. And so Bob, he calls me up. He's like, I'm calling my note. I'm like, you're what? He's like, I'm calling my note. You owe me $25,000. Please send me a check for $25,000. I was like, hold on. So you have $25,000 in a $2 million investment, and we don't have enough money to pay everyone off. And if you call your note, everyone else is going to basically their notes are going to get called too. It's going to bankrupt the company, and we're going to go out of business. And your $25,000, that you begged me to invest, is going to destroy this whole thing. And I'm negotiating a term sheet for $4 million that will keep us alive, and we'll have some hope. And you're going to call your note? Yeah. I think at that point I took the phone and just threw it against the wall. So then I sat down and cooled down a little bit, and then I went over and I picked up the other phone and I called them back, and I was like, "Fuck you!" I'm like, "Go ahead and sue me, and then I'm gonna put this all over TechCrunch, but go to hell." But that guy, biggest douchebag ever, Bob. I hate you, Bob. You know who you are. You're an idiot. And he's now a famous venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. He's raised a big fund, and everyone thinks he's cool. He's a fucking idiot. You know you are. Yeah. So yeah, you never know. So the most important thing to do is do reference checks, because I've found that that reference checks will tell you a lot. But other than that, hope and pray you don't get stuck with Bobs, because they suck.
One of my problems is geographical among them. So I was wondering, as an investor, do you consider geography that much? And my second question would be, do you consider impact of the company more than the economics?
Got it. So you mean like social impact?
Yeah.
I don't do social impact investing. I think social impact is tremendously important, and I think that there's a time and place to do social impact investing. But my job is to make my fellow investors money, and that's largely what I do. Not largely, that is what I do. Geography, I think geography is it's a super interesting question, right? Because there's clearly market inefficiencies where if all of the investors are congregated in Silicon Valley, we all know about that market, and none of us are in Africa, there's clearly opportunities to invest in Africa that we're not there seeing. But on the other hand, if I'm in Silicon Valley and I don't know anything about Africa, it's very hard for me to invest in Africa because I don't know anything about Africa. Because I only invest in things I understand, because that's my job. I should invest in things that I can be smart about. And I certainly don't know anything about that market. So yeah, geography is a very, very hard challenge. And I think there are some investors that are starting to do a better job of that. So the latest Y Combinator class, there were a bunch of companies that came out of it that were based in Africa. I think there's 500 startups just raised a fund for investing in, I think $15 million for investing in African and Middle Eastern companies. But yeah, I think it's a great challenge, and I don't think anyone's solved it yet. But there's clearly an inefficiency in the market there, no question.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, our company is actually based in Sweden. But we have the operation in East Africa.
Yeah.
So just because
where base doesn't matter. It's like where you do business, because I don't know anything about doing business in East Africa.
Yeah. So I mean, we have the actual operation. Not our customers are global. They come from all over the world. Yeah. But we have the fiscal operations in Africa, and that's become kind of sticky for some of our, when we talk to investors. They just think that part of the business and not the rest of.
Yeah, I'm sure it's different for every business. I don't know the details about yours, but I do think you're right. Like, the geographic issues are real and they're not easy. But it's when I talk to entrepreneurs. There's one thing I like to tell them that they always look at me like I'm crazy, but I think it's actually true, which is that when you have an opportunity like yours, and you're not able to raise money, it feels shitty. You're like, why can't I raise money? It's terrible. But if you were in Silicon Valley, you probably have 50 competitors who'd all raised so much money that were competing against you that your opportunity might not actually be any good because there'd be so much competition. So sometimes it seems like a curse that nobody wants to invest in your market, but it's actually a blessing, because that means you don't have any competition and you can take your time building your business more slowly. You can grow that baby slowly and carefully, and you can learn and you can get smarter versus, I've been in a market when it went hyper fast in Silicon Valley where the money just flies in. And that's a really hard place to operate as an entrepreneur. For me, I was a very inexperienced entrepreneur at that point in time, and my competitors were raising 10, 20, $30 million rounds. And if I had raised that much money, I wouldn't even have known how to spend it. I didn't know what I was doing well enough to be able to grow that fast or move that fast. And I would have just made a bigger mess than I made already. So it's sometimes a curse to not be able to raise capital, but it's often a blessing because it means your competitors can't either, and you can grow more slowly and learn. And every entrepreneur I say that to looks at me like I'm an idiot and crazy, but I do think it's true.
My question is, I'm researching a lot of VCs and business angels at the moment for investment, and the problem is that I cannot find out what they actually specialized in.
Yeah.
When you look at their portfolios, it's just like total everything.
Yeah.
And also what they write about in the About Us page is that they do everything. And what do you think about this? Aren't there specialized investors?
I have the same fucking problem. It drives me nuts. I look at my guys I know who are VCs, who are friends of mine, and I'm like, I'm like, okay, so I have this deal. I have to pass this deal around to a bunch of VCs. But like I know like 4 or 5 of them who I will give to because I know them really well. But like I got all those other guys who I know, but I don't really know that well. I'm like, do they invest in that or not? And I go to their about page. I'm like, I can't tell. It's a terrible problem. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is for that. Yeah, sorry. I wish I had a better. If you figured it out, let me know because I haven't figured it out either. It's like it's tricky. The reason for that is very simple, actually, which is that the secret of this business is deal flow because there's only a few companies that are really awesome. And so as a VC, you want to see as many different companies as possible to occasionally find the one that's really awesome. And if you get super specialized, like so if I only specialize in advertising technologies, which is like where my like past expertise is, I wouldn't see enough deals to basically find the few that are awesome. So I need to have a broader net to find occasionally awesome deals. And so and most VCs are in the same spot. So they don't like to constrain themselves too much because they want to see a bunch of things. But, you know, it makes it hard to know who to show it to. So, and I don't know the right answer. I haven't solved it.
So you gave a lot of good sound advice. I think it's the right approach to kind of towards that first investment. At the same time, there are anomalies as well, which is you often get people saying, well, actually we invest in the founder, right? And actually we're discussing today how a very young founder, Google employee, left 1 month Techstars in London, raised 500,000 the next month, which is ridiculous. But at the same time, it is interesting to kind of understand that psychology and, you know, from your experience, I mean, how common is that? And the only reason I guess I'm asking this is in the tech market, it is fast. Lots of people are doing it. So I think the right way to do it takes time. At the same time, there are people who will go out and 1 month raise enough to build a product, get to the market, and you know, it's a challenge. So
yeah, I mean, I think this the founder thing is actually relatively straightforward. Like there are founders who I know who basically like if they call me up and they're like, I'm starting a company, I'm like, I'm writing a check. I don't even need to know what they're doing. I don't care. Like they're so good that like I would be happy to write a check for them on the spot. And so what most likely is happening in the scenarios that you're talking about is that Google person had built a relationship with somebody who could write a check, and that relationship over time had developed a trust where that person was like, or maybe a group of people were like, this guy's really good. I want to invest in him and or her, whoever it is, that relationship enabled them to get a check based on who that founder was. And then usually what happens is that becomes social proof. So imagine Reed knows some kid who worked at LinkedIn, and Reed writes a check to the kid. Well, I mean, shit, if Reed's going to write a check, I'm going to follow Reed. I'll invest with Reed every day of the week, like all day long. Like it's just too easy. And so you'll see that social proof starting to happen. The thing is that social proof is like, it's a weird beast, right? It's everyone hates to miss out on a good party, and so like if you see a round coming together that's got good investors, you're like, oh shit, I got to get in that, and you go from fear to greed, and then it just becomes this huge pile on, and next thing you know, like Color has raised $20 million or whatever the hell Color raised, and everyone's like, what? And it gets a little crazy, but that's the nature of this business, right? If you can lose, 99 times out of 100 and still win, you get a little crazy sometimes. So I think there are anomalies. I think that's important to remember. But at the end of the day, it's about, do people know you? Do they trust you? Do they want to write you a check? Friends and family or professional investors who know you because they built a relationship with you over time. If people know you, they'll give you money. If people don't know you, then you have to get traction. Go get traction. Once you have traction, then we'll give you money based on the traction. Or go invent the next amazing technology that basically will, solve the world's problems by turning plastic into oil and be magic. Whatever it is.
What do you do for homework? When you like a company, it has traction, it has an awesome team. What is your daily bit? What do you do to know the founders, to know what they do, how their web page? What?
Yeah. So it's different every time. It depends on the stage of the company. My preference is to find a company really early and build a relationship. That's the best thing, which is like I can maybe like get to know you and read emails and watch progress, watch the decisions that you make. It turns out that's like, the more founders I work with, the more I watch them making decisions, the more I can recognize the people who are good and people who I don't want to work with. But the more time I have to build a relationship, the better off I am in learning about, how you're going to operate your company. then when it comes to market, it's a lot of just Googling, really, figuring out the market, talking to customers, talking to people who would potentially be competitors, like learning the market. So some markets I know really well, some I don't know, and I have to do a lot more research, but getting to know that. And then, a big part of it is just like trying to spend time with you and learn from you about like sort of like how you see the market and where it's going. But yeah, it's there's no science to it, or there's a little bit of art and a little bit of science and a little bit of like hoping and praying.
The second thing, you say you should build a relationship to investors. So it doesn't mean I send a email or I just give you some numbers of mine, even if you're not interested at all, or
Sure.
But then it lands in the spam and you're like, fuck that guy.
No. I mean, I think you got to believe that what you're doing is good. Like if it's not good, you shouldn't do it. And if it's actually good, then when you email somebody about it, they should want to hear about it. Like, and if enough people like put you in the spam filter and nobody responds back, well then maybe what you're doing sucks. Like, but like no, it's true, right? It's like it's kind of like the same thing about the product market fit thing. Like if you're working on if you tell me that you're working on a hard problem but you haven't solved it yet, well, I'm interested. I want to hear how it goes. I'll watch. And if you tell me you're working on a problem that I think is dumb, I'm going to email you and be like, I think this is dumb. Like, because like as an entrepreneur, like I spent a lot of time talking to investors, and a lot of those meetings were boring, and the investors were just like, yeah, yeah, and then then we were done, and then I was like, okay, that was a waste of time. And so when I became an investor, I decided to say, look, I'm just going to tell the truth every time, and like I'm going to try to be useful to the entrepreneurs, and like hopefully add value. And I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't know if that's the best strategy. I've only been doing it for a couple of years, so far it seems to work. But the thing is like if I don't like your idea, I'm going to tell you. Like even if you hate me, I'm still going to be like, I don't like it. Because when I was an entrepreneur, I wanted people to tell me when I was doing something dumb, because I did really dumb stuff for a long time, and I wish everyone had told me, because I would have been smart enough to listen and changed my path and spent my energies working on something that was good, where there was product market fit, where like people's hair were on fire. So yeah, I think when you email investors, like they should want to get those emails, because you should be working on a hard problem. And if they don't, hopefully they email you and they're like, this is not a good hard problem. I'm not interested in this. And you get enough of those emails back, you can use that as feedback to figure out what to work on. But at the end of the day, my job is to get your emails. That's my job. My job is to find you when you're about to you've got it, and then to give you money right once you've done all the hard work and it's all de-risked and you're about to be a billionaire. I'm supposed to invest in $1 million valuation right before it goes to $1 billion. So I want to skip all the hard work and just make the money here. So my job is to get those emails from you. I know it sounds easy. It's not. I want to skip. Okay, go ahead. That's why I gave you my email at the beginning. I love all these questions. This is great.
Yeah.
You guys are making me feel loved. It's like I'm actually doing something useful here. It's never clear. You see some guy standing up there and you're like, oh man, this is the most boring talk ever. And you're like, oh shit, the room's too small and too lit. I can't sneak out the back. Anyone can leave if you want to. It's okay. But thank you. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, you told us that after you secured Facebook, everything was much easier. But
Yeah.
how did you get the contract with Facebook?
Oh, so I played poker with the guy who was the product manager for the Facebook ads product. I'd been playing poker with him. I played poker with him. So the guy's actually relatively famous. His name's Antonio Garcia Martinez. He's the guy who wrote Chaos Monkeys. So he's like now a dear friend of mine. But yeah, so we'd played poker many years before, and then there was this guy who ran the Facebook ads team. This guy's name was Gokul Rajaram, who was a famous angel investor, and I had been introduced to Gokul by some other investor when I was raising money at one point in time, and so I would just always email Gokul, like maybe once every 3 months. I'd be like, "Hey Gokul, what's up?" And I'd tell him what was going on, just trying to stay in touch. And then at that right before Facebook went public, they had a bad Q4. Their ad product sucked back then, and I emailed Gokul. I was like, "Hey Gokul, what's up?" And I was telling him, and he's like, "Hey, you should come in for a talk." I'm like, "Okay." So I went down to Facebook. He's like, "Hey, actually go meet with Antonio." I was like, "Oh, I know Antonio." So we went and had lunch, and we were talking about what Facebook could do to fix their ad products. And I was like, "You should do retargeting. You should have retargeting on Facebook, obviously." And he was like, "Okay, whatever." And then. But it turned out that they went to Zuck and they were like, hey, we should do retargeting on Facebook. And Zuck was like, great, let's do it. And he had never said yes before, but when you miss a quarter right before you go public, suddenly you change your tune. So the ads team suddenly had like the rope to do some cool stuff. So they called us up and they're like, hey, you want to do retargeting on Facebook? I'm like, yeah. Like, that's it. But it's all serendipity, right? Like, there's no easy answer. It's not like I had a spreadsheet. I was like, play poker with Antonio 5 years ago, meet Gokul, emo Gokul. No, it's just like, it's the nature of being an entrepreneur. It's like you're in the ring and you're getting punched in the head every day, and every now and then you get ice cream, and you're just constantly throwing shit against the wall, hoping it sticks. Whole other part about being an entrepreneur, but yeah.
So are you an advisory board for some companies, and how is it going in Silicon Valley? Like, what should you do? Like, it pitches like the same system as you're looking for investor, or there's some other things I need to know?
Yeah. So I advise a bunch of companies. I think like 16 or 17 now. It's kind of crazy. Being an advisor is great. Like, people who like have a company, they're like, hey, here's free equity. I'm like, sweet, thanks. But it turns out it's actually more fun because I get to pretend like I'm an entrepreneur again and help them out with their problems. And I've actually enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a fun job. Advisors are tough, right? So generally, advisors are usually pretty worthless. Sometimes they're awesome. And it's hard to know which one is which. So my recommendation with advisors is you find people that will be useful to you, that know your market, that know your customers, that can actually be valuable. Put them on a 4-year vesting schedule for whatever equity you're going to give them. And then use them. So one of the things I find that my startups, some of them do really well and some of them don't, is they don't take advantage of me as well as they could. They don't send me emails. They don't ask for help. They just let me sit there and invest. I'm like, great. I mean, I try to be as helpful as I can, but I don't know all the problems they're working on, so I can't like jump in and solve problems. But like some of them who are very good, they email me all the time. They need things. We get on calls. They take advantage of me on a regular basis, and it's good. But yeah. Find advisors, put them on a vesting schedule. If they turn out to be useless, fire them. Just do it. Just say, hey, it's no good. It's not working well. I don't mind. I've never been fired, but if you want to fire me, go ahead. Like, it's cool. Like, if you find an advisor that is not cool with being fired, fire them faster. Because literally, like, if you gave the person free equity and it turns out they're not useful, and you're like, hey, it turned out this didn't work, and they're unhappy about the fact that you quit the deal, like, that person sucks.
I think we talk a lot about, the needs of the startups here, but what's the secret sauce behind creating a VC fund in your case?
I think about it just like a VC fund. I mean, just like a startup. So it's a baby and you get traction. So the way I got into it was AngelList had just started. Syndicates had just started on AngelList. And I was like, hey, that seems like a pretty interesting deal. I can find startups and get an allocation in a round, and I could put it up on AngelList as a syndicate lead, and then other rich people will put their money into it, and then I get carry on that money, and I can claim that I invested in the startup, and I can build a track record. I can get traction. I can start to generate social proof. I can start to build credibility, and I sold my company, and I wasn't feeling so hot, and like I was ready to try something new. So Branch Metrics, which is one of the companies I advise, we had just helped them raise their A round. So NEA was leading a $15 million round into the A for Branch, and I'd been advising them since it was 4 people, so I had some credibility with the CEO, and I went to the CEO and was like, hey, can I syndicate a small part of the round? He was like, sure, here's $200,000 in the round. I was like, okay. I didn't know what happened. So I put it up on AngelList. I was like, we have a $200,000 allocation in Branch Metrics. NEA is leading. Here's the valuation, blah, blah, blah. And like, it was gone, like in like 12 hours. And I was like, holy shit, look at that. That's really cool. And so that began my learning process of learning how to do AngelList, how to run a syndicate, how to find startups, how to generate deal flow. And it's a learning process, just like being an entrepreneur. It's like, every day you just try to move forward, you try to take another step, you try to find better companies, you try to have more relationships with people that can teach you. Every day I just try to suck a little less in that process. And I think now basically my track record is there, my IRR is there, my exits are there, like my performance is there on paper. Now it's just like having a startup that has revenues and a spreadsheet. I have that with my companies in my portfolio, and now I can raise money against that if I'm so lucky. I have a small fund, but to raise a bigger fund, I can grow up as a VC. But it's just like being an entrepreneur. You learn as you go, and I'm very much still a baby in that business. But every day I'm learning a little bit, and it's fun. It's a fun job too. Like I get to pretend like I'm an entrepreneur, which is cool.
Did you miss some startups that were actually like very well, and like you refused them, and why? If it was so? And
before you get to the second question, let me clarify that question.
Yeah.
You're saying, did I meet startups that are good startups that I liked and say no?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Okay. And the second question: do you think there's some correlation? Like, do you play poker with other VC investors? And if there's some correlation that some VC investors play better poker and they do invest better as well?
Yes. So I'll answer the first question, then answer the second question. So yes, I've refused good companies, investing in good companies on a regular basis. It's because I don't know. Like I like to find. So I believe that basically the alpha, the advantage of an investor is a function of having knowledge and knowing more than the rest of the market. Like if everybody, and there's a lot of good companies that are great companies that I don't have an advantage. I look at them and I'm like, I don't know more than the other people who would be investing in this company, and I probably know less. Like I have no business trying to basically find alpha in situations where I don't know this market or this problem or this founder really well. I much prefer companies that basically are the ugliest, shittiest, terriblest little company that nobody likes and everybody hates and nobody wants to invest in, but that I have like some advantage in. Like that's where I like to put my money, because that's where it ends up, the real alpha in my business happens. And generally, if you look at the returns in the venture investing business, the majority of the big outcomes are weird companies nobody likes. Nobody liked Uber when Uber started. Nobody liked Airbnb when Airbnb started. Nobody liked Facebook when Facebook started. There's a lot of companies that were really ugly when they first started that ended up being amazing. Now there's a bunch of other companies that were super hot, but a lot of ugly companies have returned big. Poker, yeah. So I got my start in Silicon Valley when I first moved there. I somehow talked my way into a poker game that was around all the different VC firms. So it was like it would happen at every VC firm once every couple weeks. And yeah, some of those VCs are terrible poker players, and they did turn out to be pretty bad investors. But some of them are great investors and bad poker players, and some are good poker players and bad investors. So I don't think there's a correlation. I think it's just a different thing. But yeah.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and I co-founded a gaming app with a friend about 1.5 years ago. And it's received quite a lot of traction, and we're at the stage of wanting to raise some money.
Cool.
But we've also got a second app idea that requires a lot more capital, and we're tossing between whether we should try and get investment for the first app that's got a lot of traction and a lot of users, or if we should try and get investment for our second app, which requires a lot of capital. Yeah, that's the question.
The easy answer is it's impossible to know more without knowing more. Or is it possible to answer that question without knowing more? Yeah. But the harder answer is, I think things that require a lot of capital should only be attacked if you have access to a lot of capital easily. So if it's like I said in the beginning, money is really, really easy for some entrepreneurs and virtually impossible for almost everybody else. So if you're one of those entrepreneurs that can get access to money really easily, then great, go for those capital intensive problems. You've got an advantage, take advantage of it. But generally I think going after capital intensive problems, I think usually you can break a problem down and make it less capital intensive and demonstrate traction and get through it. I think the lesson there is that you should only ever have one hard problem. If you're starting a company, you shouldn't have two hard problems. You should have one hard problem. And fundraising should not be one of your hard problems. It should be, make your hard problem the thing you spend all of your time and energy on, the business. And then, if you can raise a bunch of money to do that easily, then great, you can have a capital-intensive business. But, if you can't, then I generally don't like it. Because the other problem that you run into with capital-intensive businesses is that the cycle can go against you, and even if you're a great entrepreneur, and even if you have a great business, if you have a capital-intensive business and the cycle turns, if that idiot Donald Trump causes the problems it appears he's going to cause, the cycle's going to turn, and suddenly the markets are going to go south, and capital's going to get tight. And if you have a capital-intensive business and capital's tight, you're screwed, and that's no fun. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to always control your own destiny. So I personally don't love capital-intensive businesses for that reason, but people have made a lot of money doing them, so it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. It's just
So I should focus on the first app then, basically.
Well, no, remember the first part I said at the beginning. It's hard to know unless I.
Yeah.
But
Well, thanks a lot, Zach, and big round of applause.
Good life, family.